So think about this for a second. What if the reason your company or your government or, any massive system you rely on is failing? What if it has absolutely nothing to do with bad leadership?
Right.
And what if it has everything to do with the fact that we just forgot to mathematically program the steering wheel?
I mean, that is just a staggering thought. It completely upends how we usually process failure, right?
It totally does, because
Mhm.
we see it all the time. When a civilization visibly malfunctions or an economy crashes, there is this immediate, almost universal reflex to just retreat into moral language.
Oh, absolutely, like a security blanket.
Exactly.
All right.
The supply chain breaks down and someone says, well, the market provides, a political system gridlocks, and we hear the people have spoken. Or, if you look historically, God wills it. We use these moral incantations to comfort ourselves.
Because they give us a narrative of intention, right? And everything around us feels chaotic. We desperately want to believe someone or something is driving the car.
Right. But then you step into this entirely different perspective. There's this whole tradition of thinkers who look at that exact same chaos, and to them, all that moral language sounds like a complete smokescreen.
Yeah, they look at those failures and argue that you are basically hiding specific mechanisms that nobody actually designed, and more importantly, that nobody's auditing.
Which brings us to the exact mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring this fascinating essay by Elias Kunis called The Mechanist Tradition.
It's such a great piece.
We're going to track, like 2,300 years of brilliant minds trying to engineer governance exactly like a machine. We'll examine the specific walls they crashed into, why their designs fell apart, and this is the crazy part, how physics, specifically thermodynamics, might actually hold the missing blueprint for a civilization that survives.
And this raises an urgent point for you, the listener, right up front. Whether you are running a household or scaling a startup company or just participating in a sovereign country, you are at the mercy of mechanisms. You either engineer those mechanisms or they engineer you.
It's so true. So where do we start? How do we even begin to engineer a state?
Well, to understand that, we have to rewind to the thinkers who tried to strip the magic out of the universe. They looked at nature and wanted to replace all these occult forces and mystical spirits with, gears, pulleys, and actual physical laws.
So we're going way back to 1651 with Thomas Hobbes.
Exactly.
And he's watching the horrific, bloody chaos of the English Civil War. I mean, neighbors killing neighbors. And he performs this really radical founding move. He strips the state of divine justification and literally rebuilds it as an artificial man.
Right. He essentially viewed the state as a thermodynamic containment vessel.
Yeah.
The English Civil War was this state of maximum entropy, what he famously called the war of all against all.
Yeah.
So his artificial man, the Leviathan, that was an engineering project to stop that chaos. The sovereign leader is the sole providing motion, the magistrates are the artificial joints, the systems of rewards and punishments are the nerves.
Wow.
He was basically trying to build a pressure valve to contain the explosive decay of human violence. And then you have thinkers like Lemaitre and Robert Boyle taking it even further. Right? Boyle champions the mechanical philosophy, arguing that all phenomena in the universe can be explained by just matter in motion, nothing else.
Yeah, and Lemaitre writes that whole treatise, arguing that humans are literally just machines that wind themselves. Life is just matter in motion.
But what they were actively rejecting was almost just as important as what they were building, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They were throwing out occult qualities because occult forces explain nothing. They are just labels for our ignorance dressed up as knowledge.
Like saying a magnet works because of sympathy or something.
Right, or a potion works because of vital spirits. That doesn't help you build anything. So they tossed it all out to focus purely on observable mechanics.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's like they successfully reverse engineered a car and proved definitively that it runs on internal combustion instead of, like, magic. But they accidentally threw away the steering wheel in the process.
That perfectly illustrates the massive deficit they created. By throwing out the magic, they also threw out Aristotelian telos.
Telos, that's the purpose, right?
Exactly. The fundamental concept of what a system is for, its ultimate destination. In ancient philosophy, purpose was inextricably bundled with physics. Heavy objects fell because they supposedly wanted to reach the center of the universe.
Right.
So when the old physics fell apart, the concept of purpose just fell right along with it.
The mechanists could meticulously explain all the gears and the levers. They knew how things worked, but they had absolutely no scientific way to explain what they were for.
And this specific deficit triggered what we can call the Vitalism War, spanning roughly 1850 to 1930.
The vitalists being the ones who wanted the magic back.
Right. They argued that life couldn't just be a machine, that it required some special, mystical, vital spark to have direction and purpose, but the mechanists fought back fiercely. A researcher named Jacques Loeb practically ended the debate by proving life is just chemistry.
The sea urchin guy.
Yes. He famously induced reproduction in sea urchins, a process called parthenogenesis, simply by changing the salt concentration in their water. He didn't need male sea urchins, and he certainly didn't need a magical vital spark. He just tweaked the chemical mechanism, and the machine reproduced.
But a mechanism with no purpose is just a wind-up toy walking into a wall. Like, an enzyme catalyzes a reaction, but the enzyme doesn't want anything.
Exactly.
Even when the great biologist T.H. Huxley argued in 1893 that civilization is an artificial garden meant to subvert the harsh, chaotic process of natural selection, he hit a wall. He couldn't specify what the garden was actually supposed to grow.
He knew governance needed an objective to fight off the chaos of nature, but he couldn't derive one purely from physics. So the mechanists decisively won the battle over ontology.
Our fundamental theory of what exists.
Right. They proved life is a machine, but they completely lost the teleology. They had a functioning engine, but no mathematical way to program a destination.
So if the early scientists threw out purpose as this unscientific mysticism, how did we ever get it back?
This is where the story jumps to 1943. Right in the middle of World War II and the invention of cybernetics.
Okay, Norbert Wiener, right?
Yes, Wiener is working on anti-aircraft predictors. The military needed to shoot down enemy planes, but planes move so fast that you can't shoot where they are. You have to shoot where they are going to be.
Right, you have to anticipate.
Exactly. Wiener, along with Arturo Rosenbluth and Julian Bigelow, realized they had to model the pilot's anticipation and correction as part of the mechanical system itself. And in doing so, they published a paper that is arguably the most consequential in this entire tradition.
Wow.
Working with servo mechanisms, they dissolved the boundary between human intention and machine operation.
Wait, so you're saying a missile and a thermostat share the exact same mechanical math for wanting something?
Yes.
That is earth-shattering. The shift here is that purpose isn't some ghost in the machine anymore. It is negative feedback acting to reduce the error between a current state and a reference signal.
It completely repairs the 300-year deficit created by the early mechanical philosophers. Wiener proved that a thermostat wants the room at 20 degrees Celsius in the exact same mathematical sense that a heat-seeking missile wants its moving target. Purpose is just an engineering parameter. It's literally a feedback loop.
Okay, but hang on. If purpose is just an engineering parameter, a measurable feedback loop pulling a system toward a target, why didn't we immediately apply this to our governments? I mean, why isn't Congress just a giant thermostat regulating society?
That's the tragic part. The cybernetics pioneers built the bridge, but nobody in political science actually crossed it. We saw cybernetics applied beautifully elsewhere, though.
Like where?
Well, Stafford Beer operationalized it in the 1970s with his viable system model. He proved that an explicit purpose, a reference signal, is an architectural component required for any organization to survive. He actually tried to build a real-time cybernetic nervous system for the entire state of Chile.
Project Cybersyn.
Yes. They built this futuristic operations room to manage the economy using networks of telex machines. The goal was to give the government real-time feedback from factories so they could adjust policy instantly.
That's wild for the 1970s.
It was. Sadly, it was destroyed by a military coup before it could fully operate.
And today, we even see this feedback loop concept in biology, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Michael Levin's modern bioelectric research.
Oh, absolutely. Levin's work shows that cells and tissues physically regenerate toward a target shape. They communicate electrically to figure out what shape they're supposed to be, and they keep working until the error is zero. Goal-directedness is a literal property of organized matter at every scale.
So the science proved beyond a doubt that purpose is a mechanism. But the people designing governments over the centuries were completely isolated from this cybernetic tradition. They were trying to build governance machines blindly, relying on intuition and philosophy rather than actual feedback loops.
Which means, while the cybernetics guys were figuring out the math of purpose in the 1940s, the people actually building states were operating on a totally separate track, centuries earlier. We're talking about Kautilya, way back in 300 BCE.
Designing the Mauryan administrative state in India.
Right. And what Kautilya achieved is breathtaking when you look at the math. Modern econometric reconstructions reveal he was doing formal mechanism design thousands of years before the term even existed.
Mechanism design. How so?
While the Mauryan Empire was massive, if you send a tax collector on a 2-month journey to a distant province, the emperor has no way to verify if the collector is stealing.
Because there's no real-time feedback.
Exactly. So Kautilya mathematically designed tax rates and established massive 800-to-1 wage ratios to counter that exact problem. He built a self-correcting system where it was in the selfish interest of the distant officials, to be honest. He engineered behavior through structural incentives.
But Kautilya's ultimate purpose was just raw state power, right? It wasn't derived from any foundational law of nature.
No, it wasn't. And a similar blind spot plagued the Enlightenment thinkers much later. David Hume argued that if you design the form of government correctly, outcomes are robust regardless of whether the people in charge are virtuous or vicious. Architecture beats human disposition.
Yeah, which makes sense. And Montesquieu designed his famous checks and balances as opposing forces maintaining a dynamic equilibrium.
Right.
But balancing power prevents tyranny, which is great, but it still answers how, without answering what for. It keeps the machine from blowing up, but it doesn't optimize for anything specific.
Exactly. And if we fast forward to modern times, we get Leonid Hurwicz winning the Nobel Prize in 2007 for formal mechanism design.
Oh, the reverse game theory guy.
Yes, Hurwicz formalized reverse game theory. Instead of watching people play a game and analyzing what happens, you design the rules of the game to mathematically guarantee the outcome you want.
Like the cake cutting example.
You know it. The classic example is 2 kids sharing a piece of cake. If one kid cuts and chooses, they take the bigger piece. But if you design a mechanism where one kid cuts the cake and the other kid gets to choose the slice,
The first kid will cut it perfectly down the middle.
exactly. You engineered fairness without relying on the kids being virtuous.
That is just the most elegant tool for institutional engineering ever. But the essay highlights a fatal flaw when you try to apply Hurwicz's cake-cutting design to a whole country. It's called the sovereignty paradox.
The sovereignty paradox.
Yeah. Think of it like this. It's as if a CEO gets to set the metrics for their own multi-million-dollar performance bonus. The math of the game breaks down because the player is also guarding the goalpost.
That's a great way to put it. Standard mechanism design requires an external enforcer. In an auction, the auctioneer enforces the rules on the bidders. In the cake example, a parent makes sure the kids follow the rule. But in a sovereign state's constitution, the officials are simultaneously the players and the enforcers. Who guards the guardians? The mathematics of mechanism design simply cannot close the loop without a referee that exists outside the universe of the game.
So we have all these partial successes. We have Kautilya's incentives, Montesquieu's balance, Hurwicz's cake-cutting all crashing into walls. So what happens when someone actually succeeds?
What do you mean?
Well, what happens when someone puts the full stack together, the mechanical structure, the architecture, and a concrete purpose, but they program the wrong purpose?
Yeah. We can look at Jeremy Bentham in the early 19th century to answer that. Bentham had the full stack. His constitutional code was a masterclass in incentive design. He invented the panopticon as a transparency
This
mechanism.
understood the principal agent problem perfectly.
He really did. He wanted to tie the selfish interests of politicians mechanically to the public interest.
But the problem was his target. His reference signal was utility, maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And the result of aiming a perfectly engineered state machine at utility is what the framework calls the paperclip maximizer.
Right. In artificial intelligence, the paperclip maximizer is a famous thought experiment. You build this ultra-intelligent AI and tell it to make paperclips. Because it has no other context or human values, it consumes all the resources on Earth, including humans, to maximize that one single metric.
So if you aim a massive society at a single abstract metric, the metric improves, but the civilization dies.
Right.
GDP goes up, but the infrastructure rocks. Quality of life metrics rise, but fertility rates plummet to zero. The machine just consumes its own societal substrate to produce the metric.
Bentham had the correct engineering method, but the completely wrong target function. Much later in the 1970s, an ecologist named Howard Odum tried to fix this.
How did he tackle it?
Well, Odum correctly realized that purpose had to be derived from physics, not human ideology. So he looked at thermodynamics and proposed the maximum power principle. He argued that since civilization is a thermodynamic engine, its ultimate purpose should be to maximize the rate of energy throughput.
Okay, maximizing energy throughput. It makes me think of a fire versus a flame. Odum optimized for a fire, but a civilization actually needs to optimize for a flame.
That's an incredible analogy. Let's look at the thermodynamic mechanism behind that. Strip mining is a fire. Monoculture farming is a fire. They feature massive energy throughput, but incredibly low complexity, and they burn out their environment rapidly.
And the flame.
A living system, a flame, manages its energy throughput specifically to sustain complex structures over deep time. It regulates the burn to keep the system alive.
Which brings us to what the text calls the amplifier warning. Full stack mechanism amplifies whatever goal you feed it. If you build a partial system with the wrong target, you get local, contained damage. But if you build a full stack mechanist state and give it the wrong purpose,
You get civilizational suicide at industrial efficiency.
exactly. Guessing the target leads to the paperclip maximizer, and aiming for raw energy leads to burnout. So we have to look at the one constraint in the entire universe that doesn't care about human preferences, political opinions, or moral language.
Thermodynamics, specifically the second law of thermodynamics, which dictates that entropy or disorder always increases in a closed system.
The ultimate universal deadline. Everything decays. Mountains crumble, iron rusts, and empires fall.
Any system, whether it's a single biological cell, a massive rainforest, or a global civilization, must actively generate enough organized complexity to outpace that natural decay, or it dies. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger called this feeding on negative entropy.
Legentropy.
Exactly. Therefore, if you are looking for a scientifically derived purpose for a sovereign state, the only non-arbitrary telos is what this framework calls aliveness.
Aliveness.
Yeah.
So not just breathing or existing, but the sustained generation of organized complexity over the longest possible time horizon, flourishing as the maximum safety margin against entropy.
It's not something you vote on, right? It is discovered by examining what physical structures actually survive thermodynamic selection. And once you have that scientifically derived telos, the institutional architecture logically follows. The framework proposes a solution to that sovereignty paradox we talked about.
Oh, right. Who guards the guardians?
Exactly. The solution is a fourth branch of government.
A fourth branch. I mean, that sounds kind of intimidating. Does this mean humans don't get to choose their destiny anymore? Are we just slaves to physics with this fourth branch acting as a super referee, micromanaging every citizen to make sure we are generating complexity?
No, not at all. The fourth branch isn't a dictator with an army. It acts as an intelligent mechanism auditor. It doesn't command citizens. Going back to Huxley's concept of the artificial garden, it sets the selection environment.
So it's auditing the system itself.
Right. It's stress tests institutions, red teams new policies before they are deployed, and monitors the society to detect if it's drifting toward high entropy collapse.
But how does it enforce anything without police or physical force? The text says the enforcement is informational, not mechanical. What does that mean?
It operates by making violations of physical reality undeniably visible. When the fourth branch proves, through rigorous auditing, that a policy is mathematically leading to systemic decay, it makes that failure public and binary.
Like an audit report.
Yes. Think of an auditor proving a company is entirely fraudulent. The enforcement doesn't come from a gun. It comes from the fact that once the math is revealed, the legitimacy of the failing institution simply collapses.
Oh.
The substrate, meaning the citizens, the capital, the energy, it all just withdraws its support because the illusion is broken.
So under this system, which the essay calls telocracy, the state doesn't actually tell you how to live your life. It purely acts as a constraint search over policy space.
Exactly.
It maps out the fatal boundaries of entropy. It basically says, if we cross this line, the math says we die. But within those boundaries, distributed human agents have total, radical freedom to find creative, unpredictable paths to survive and thrive.
The state designs the constraints of the garden, but the individual people are the ones growing. It relies on continuous redesign based on real-time feedback, basically outrunning entropy by aligning human freedom with the physical laws of survival.
Let's pull all these threads together because this is a lot. We started 2,300 years ago with Kautilya perfectly tuning wage mechanics in India to fight geographic distance. We watched Jacques Loeb tweak saltwater to create life in sea urchins, proving vitalism was a myth.
We did.
And we saw Norbert Wiener realize during the chaos of World War II that a thermostat and a human both use negative feedback to find their purpose.
Right, and we also watched brilliant engineers from Bentham to Hurwitz crash their incredible governance machines into walls because they lacked a thermodynamic compass, or they couldn't close the sovereignty loop without an external referee.
So the ultimate takeaway here is that we have to stop retreating into moral language when our systems fail. We have to stop crossing our fingers and hoping that the next election will miraculously produce perfectly virtuous leaders to fix the machine. We need to start engineering architectures with a physics-derived purpose to outrun entropy.
I completely agree. And I want to leave you with a final concept to mull over, drawing on the biological research of Michael Levin that we touched on earlier.
Oh, the bioelectric cell regeneration guy.
That's the one. Levin studies what he calls the cognitive light cone.
The cognitive light cone. It sounds like astrophysics, but applied to biology.
It does, right. It refers to the spatial and temporal scale over which any system can actively pursue goals. A single cell has a tiny cognitive light cone. It can only react to immediate local chemistry in the present moment.
Makes sense.
But a complex organism has a massive light cone. It can anticipate the future and coordinate millions of cells to regenerate toward a distant target shape.
How does that apply to the listener's daily life, though?
Well, think about the systems you operate inside of every single day. Your household, your company, your community, your country. What is the size of their cognitive light cone?
Oh, I see.
Are they just blindly reacting to immediate stimuli like the next quarterly earnings report, the outrage of the next news cycle, the next election, like a single isolated cell? Or do they have a deliberate, engineered feedback loop that can anticipate the distant future and pull the system towards sustained complexity?
Because if your organization doesn't have a mathematically real reference signal pulling it toward aliveness, what exactly is it maximizing?
Exactly. If you don't know the reference signal of the machine you're operating inside of, you might just be the paperclip.
That is a terrifying thought to end on. Next time you catch yourself saying the market will fix it or the people have spoken, stop and ask yourself what mechanism is actually running the machine. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.